Hello and welcome to another episode of the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. This is John Chance. My guest today is Zach Kromkowski. I was so worried about the last name that I messed it up.
Zach, you overthought the last name and you got the first name. No worries.
Kromkowski. Here we go. He is a force in cybersecurity, driven to make system hardening both effective and accessible. Co-founder of Sention, he and his team developed an innovative platform that automates hardening for workstation servers and browsers to CIS standards, streamlining compliance and security. So we're going to talk about security, cybersecurity, I suppose, more specifically. So this is a topic that is not necessarily marketing, very related to what we do as marketers, very related to what we do as business owners. So Zach, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I mean, you kicked off right there, John. Why is this relatable to marketing firms and owners? Right. I mean, our little pre-session banter, it's like us marketing firms, and when we work with clients, they're telling us a lot of their IP. They're telling us their brand, their image. All of these details is how bad actors might be able to create a more targeted phishing email or more targeted, more persuasive email that isn't real. So even though we're talking about security on a marketing podcast, it's all related. So I really appreciate the pre-show banter we had, John.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, I mean, we have clients that, you know, their cousin's ex-boyfriend set up all of their passwords on things and they just have them on a spreadsheet and they give them to us. And, you know, as a marketing agency, in some ways that makes life easier because I've got all the keys, right? But it's also should be very scary to anybody that is taking that data. So let's kind of back up and can you give us some best practices on, you know, the typical small business? We can get into the agency, maybe it's a little different, but the typical small business, you know, what are some of the things they need to be doing as just routine practices, not because the sky's falling, but because, you know, lots of things happen, right? You've got bad actors, but you've also got disgruntled employees. Maybe you've got, you know, lots of, you know, things that can happen in the world because stuff happens. So let's kind of start there. What are the basics?
Yeah. I mean, there's risk to anything. Again, in that pre-show, we talked about how, as you know, duct tape marketing, you have your own third-party vendors. What can I do to protect myself? And you shared a little bit about that. So talking to those basics, there's a misconception with security that you have to invest hundreds, thousands of dollars just to have security. And I'll be the first vendor to admit, you don't need to spend a ton of money on security. There are things you can do specifically called system hardening. So this is one of the first things, in my opinion, any business owner, any SMB can really focus on. This is a concept of understanding where are your assets? Where are your computers? Where is your server? Maybe you have one, maybe you don't, right? Where are your computers? And the next step of saying, how are they configured? What software is installed on this computer? How can I configure that new software to be more secure? So talking about some of these easy examples, something every small business owner I talk to always, and my parents, right, my family, for example, they want to save their passwords to the browser. Okay. Yeah. This is universally just accepted. This is what everyone does. But the browser, the Google, the Microsoft Edge, these are not security first browser password storage methods, right? There are literally companies that dedicate their entire business model just to saving the password. So that's like Bitwarden, LastPass. Right. And when I talk about hardening, you know, you can't write a policy and say, hey, employees, I don't want any of you to save your password to the browser and expect them to do that. When I talk about hardening, we literally remove the ability to save a password to the browser. That way, that policy is enforced and happens by nature. There's no way around it. So that's one aspect of hardening, John.
Yeah, awesome. So what about, I guess I'll stay on that same topic. Sure. What about the fact that, like in my particular case, there is no server, there is no central office. In a lot of cases, people are using their own devices to, you know, to connect to many of the assets. So how does somebody who has a distributed workforce, is that going to be different, or you know, are we really just going to run a much higher risk?
Yeah. So this is another good follow-up. It's this concept of risk and being able to communicate this as a marketing department or that owner is really important, because if you can educate and talk towards your risk, it's going to build more trust. And this trust, if I'm outsourcing my marketing as Sention, I have to trust the person that I want to work with, right? So let's say there is a distributed network per BYOD devices, it's my personal computer and my work computer. What can we do? One of the things, and I'll stay on the topic of browsers, right? Browser security, browser hardening is very important. You can write a policy to say, hey, for work, you have to use the Google Chrome browser. For personal, use the other one, right? The Edge, the Firefox. Or if you want to set up a Google Workspace, if you have a little bit of budget to invest, you can create a Google Chrome profile and you configure the profile to have company standards, and then the personal one they manage on their own. There is a level of risk to that decision because they still have access to the other profile. Worst case scenario, that profile is compromised and they find a way to get to the other one. But you at least have that segmentation to add an additional barrier to that bad actor, right? So when I talk about hardening, again, the key thing is here not to have default settings. If your settings are in defaults, a bad actor will know what the settings are before they get there. So if we can change some of those settings and create even the smallest barrier for that bad actor to have to invest 10 minutes instead of 30 seconds, they might just bypass you and go to the next target. They may not even try to hack you anymore.
Yeah, a great example of that is not necessarily on a server, but many of our clients are on WordPress, and just a simple thing like changing the page name of the admin login, does that same thing because they're out there knowing that 90% of the sites out there, it's admin, WP, dash admin. And so, if they're not going to find that in the 1 second bot, search, they're probably going to move on. So
that is a really good example. And, we talk about WordPress, but we can also talk about Microsoft in the same respect. So there's also an administrator account on the workstation, on the laptop itself. And that admin account, we could talk about Fortinet firewalls, right? The password and username is, if we just take that 5 minutes to change these default choices, it adds an extra layer of effort. And this is, by most intensive purposes, the most important takeaway from the show is by adding layers of difficulty, even just one layer makes you a target that they probably won't want to hit.
Yeah, because you see a lot of these, things are obviously being done by bots in a lot of cases. So they're, the bots just told ping this, and so it'll move on.
Exactly. That's exactly right, John. That is a perfect way to say it.
So what about many people? I don't know what the percentages are these days, but a lot of especially virtual companies have turned to Google Workspace as really a lot of, their internal storage, their, email, their calendars. What are some best practices for, that? I know, super admins have some security things they can set up. So what are some best practices to make sure that even if it's not the most secure thing, you can make it more secure?
Absolutely. So this is going to go into more, I guess you're a Google house. You want to use, single sign on. You just want to click sign on with Google. That's great, right? But we do that so often. We're just signing up for this free trial of that, free trial of that. It builds up so much. So my recommendation here would be, one, look at, Google had a recent update. My CISO was extremely excited, but you can actually see now all of the accounts that are linked to your single sign-on. Right. And you can easily remove that from having access. Because again, this is looking at the layers of security. If your single sign-on, if your Google account is unfortunately compromised, now they have access to everything. Yeah. And even things you don't use or don't need anymore. So doing that asset inventory review allows you to reduce your attack surface and reduce the things that have access. And let's talk about the flip side of that. If that third party company, the one you did use single sign on to sign on with, and you don't even need it anymore, they get compromised. Now they can leverage that to attack you. Right? Because you still are authenticated. You still have the permissions because you never removed it. So that first most important best practice would be to review what you currently have available via that single sign-on.
What about users? Are there policies that you should have all of your users adhering to?
This is a good one. So this goes towards, disable browser password manager. So that one example is the most relatable to everyone because everyone knows what a password is. Everyone knows how to save a password. I'll go high level on this, but there's an organization. It's a free nonprofit. It's called Center for Internet Security, CIS. And they have free downloadable PDFs on how to configure your Google Chrome, how to configure your Microsoft Edge. And that setting I gave the example of with passwords, that's about one setting out of 100 some different settings.
Right.
So another example is, when executing a download, you have to explicitly say, download it to this folder, right? Mm-hmm. It makes you do one extra click, because for that fish, without that in place, that fish you click automatically done. With the extra layer, now the user says, okay, I'm going to click this. Oh, now it wants to trigger a download? That's not behavior I expected. Mm-hmm. And it allows your employee, it allows your clients, it allows you to take an extra second to say, is this what I thought would happen? And maybe that extra second prevents the worst from happening.
A little bit about password management as it relates to certainly to Google, but then you also mentioned some of the password managers out there. Are there best practices for password management in general?
Yeah, so this one's good. So 2FA, I'll say this on every single episode I go on for any field. Password managers are critical. Save your passwords there, but let's talk about getting into the password manager. This has to be the most unique password, because you can't put it in their password manager. You can't, because if you don't know this password, you can't sign into it to figure out what it is, right? So you need to know that password, and that is something you should treat like your social security number, whether you have it written down and put into a safe, or you just have it memorized, which memorized is, of course, the best practice. But making sure this has at least 20 different characters. And when I say characters, I'm referring to letters, numbers, and symbols, right? Those are the things that make a strong password. And because this is a password you use nowhere else, it's a single password, this is actually not something I would recommend to rotate or change. This is just your forever password. Yeah. Until your safe gets broken into, until you get an alert saying possible password compromise, you never have to rotate this password. This is your single source of truth to get into your password manager. And yeah, on top of that, I'll say one more time, the 2FA, if every piece of software, everything that you have access to, always go through and just see, hey, in the settings section or the security and options section, do they have a 2FA option available? Do you want me to go a little bit deeper into why that's important, John?
No, but I do want to explain, not everybody knows the acronym 2FA. So, two-factor authentication. So Perfect. We've all got some, all the financial folks have gone to almost forcing that. So, right. Yep. So you log in and then says, all right, we're not sure this is you. We're going to text you a code, or you need to use an authenticator or something. So it's just a second hoop, if you will, to, somebody could have your phone. Yep. They could have your password so they could authenticate it, but it just adds an extra hoop, for somebody that's out there in some faraway island that's trying to hack into your stuff.
And I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you called me out for that. I do my best to speak all of my acronyms. It's alphabet soup in the security world, but this is a cool thing. And relating it again back to the marketing departments and marketing teams and doing sales, right? If you were trying to sell Sention or a security company, hey, I want to do your marketing. I need all of this brand information. I need all of your value props. I need whatever to build the perfect messaging. If one question I would probably ask, hey, how are you storing this? Right? So marketing departments may want to take, half a step into enabling their sales team to say, hey, if it ever makes sense, feel free to let the prospect know, hey, we secure our data this way. We have managed browsers, right? We do use 2FA. Like, if a marketing firm said that to me and leaned into my space as a security vendor, I'd be impressed. I'd be like, hey, maybe they're not experts, but they took that half a step to at least try to appeal to what I care about. And that would mean a lot to me.
So here's my other topic. I'm going to throw this one in here. This might just mix up the soup a little bit, but where do you stand on VPNs? So again, since we're all over the world and all doing, we're all logging into like Google to do X, should we all be using virtual private networks that kind of mask our IPs?
Yeah. I mean, this again goes towards that BYOD. If you are an enterprise who can only access certain things via the on-premise domain. You have to be connected. You have to be on site in order to obtain certain information. You're going to be inherently required to have a VPN. Now, the debate kind of comes in, okay, we can only access the data on site. We have no one remote. Do we really need a VPN? Right. In that case, you probably don't. I mean, more is always better, but in that case, it's probably overkill. If everyone is already working on site, the computers never leave the business, right? Everything has to be done there. There's not a lot of value because the data is never leaving that secure built-in environment. Now, to your point, a lot of people are BYOD. We're all remote nowadays. So yeah, they really do become that backbone to say, if I don't lock out some of that business data and require a VPN in order to reach it, anyone can reach it, right? So it's going to depend on your business model, your business setup. But yeah, VPNs are critical for those remote environments. But if you are on site, probably not necessary.
So you talked about if somebody was wanting to do your marketing. If I went to a company and they were asking, in fact, we've had this happen before where, people have an IT company that they work with and they're like, hey, here's our checklist of security standards. Do you meet them? Yeah. So is there kind of I wouldn't call it a gold standard, but maybe even a minimum standard that if I went to them and just said, oh yeah, we are BXYC compliant, is there one sort of compliance level that say a small business should strive towards?
So there's an easy answer that comes to mind here, and that's going to be SOC 2 compliance, which is maybe what you're leaning towards. Yeah. And it's definitely one of the most common and most understood compliances to meet. And it would mean something to me. It would definitely say, well, they at least did that. That means they care about it to some extent. The follow-up question, and if you do take the approach of getting a SOC 2, which, yes, that's a good approach. Sention has one, right? We're doing all of this. But be able to say, not only do we have one, this is what we got it for. So that's the very unique thing with SOC 2. I can get a SOC 2 on the Sention website, but the Sention solution itself has no security certification, right? Mm-hmm. So if you intend to take the approach of leading or injecting at some point during the sales conversation as a marketing firm, hey, we have our SOC 2, be sure to be ready for that follow-up question and say, what's your SOC 2 for? Yeah. Because that is something that we would ask if anyone ever said that to us.
And I believe that's SOC 2, right?
It is. Yep. And I think it's the Roman numerals 2 is usually how it's.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, if people want to look that up. We're 18 minutes and 38 seconds into this recording. Let's talk about AI.
Oh boy.
So does AI, where are the risks, I suppose, posed by AI that we need to at least be thinking about?
So risk, especially in the relation to marketing and the business field that you cater to, John, you are a gold mine to a bad actor. Why? We talked about this a little bit at the start. But you have multiple companies' brand, multiple companies' points of contact, multiple companies' just image. If you were to be compromised, and I already heard you have your layers of security, so, kudos to you on being able to talk towards that. Very good conversation pre-show. But let's talk about if worst case scenario you were compromised. That AI can now ingest hundreds of companies' unique branding colors, branding verbiage, branding everything, and it takes that data and then can target the next business, your customer. You have a similar risk profile to a managed service provider. So a managed service provider will typically manage the IT and security and has more access, so they can be a direct point of breach, right? They can take advantage of things, but you're the next layer. You're the layer still hugely valuable to an AI because that AI now is tailoring its messaging, becoming you, talking to that end client. And it's going to be hard to tell the difference, John. I mean, that's the end of the day. Our AIs are becoming so trained and so tailored. If we inject it with the appropriate information, which marketing firms already have, how are your clients going to know the difference?
I actually saw somebody post, and again, there are definitely a lot of people out there trying to kind of lead with the fear factor, but some of it's real. And they were suggesting that if you got a phone call from somebody and your boss, your spouse, and they were asking you for something that you thought was a little odd, but it sure sounded like them, that, that level of fake is going to be out there, and that people are actually talking about having your own sort of password with each other.
I love the stories. And when we call partners, and sometimes, they don't always have our number saved. And a lot of, just you guys, we're all in marketing here, right? We've done the cold calls, we've done the customer calls, and they may not recognize the number. Some security companies will take an edgier take to this and have a little AI recording or AI interface to almost annoy the person on the other line. They simply pretend to be a real person, but you're actually talking to a computer the whole time. And that's just one piece of AI, right? Now, you take that kind of a comedy scenario, that satire, like, oh, it was just used for goofy, but you actually allow it to now make outgoing calls, make those outgoing fakes. Having that key password phrase makes a difference. I think my biggest point here is, hey, can you remind me what so-and-so's story was, right? Doing something personal that an AI probably doesn't know. And I'm going to be honest, I've had to do that. Like, hey, this conversation's been going for 45 seconds. I haven't felt anything real out of it. I'm going to put a very personal question here to see how it responds. And sure enough, it couldn't. It just went back to the replay loop.
Yeah. Wow. So, Zach, I appreciate you taking a few moments to stop by the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. We obviously had a wide range of topics. It probably just stirred up more questions than answers.
Happy to come back.
But you want to invite people where they might want to connect with you and maybe find out more about some of the things we talked about if they have some concerns.
Yeah. So my name, again, Zach Kromkowski. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find that at Security Zach as the profile name. But the big thing I want to shout out here is you don't need a security budget to do security activities. The things I talked about today is knowing what software you have, knowing what hardware you have, and then changing settings. If you're overwhelmed and don't know what these settings do, we have free documentation across YouTube and our resource hub to say this setting does that, this setting does that. And you can take advantage of this 100% free offering to do some of these steps without paying anything. Now, if you do want to do this at a mass scale, Sention automates all of this. That's the plug. But there's a lot of free steps you can do without even investing $1.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate you stopping by, and hopefully we run into you one of these days out there on the road.